Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, April 9th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone. I've been covering this town longer than anybody, and I'm here with our special contributor, Scott Budman, looking rested after a week off, business and tech reporter for NBC Bay Area. And once again, we are creating this podcast from our respective homes via Zoom. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove, and our host for this podcast, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Okay, Scott, you look tanned and rested. I heard the general outcry and gnashing of teeth that you weren't covering the Valley this week.
General outcry, and how tan are any of us when we stay home all the time, really.
Yeah. So did you rouse yourself this morning from the lawn chair and the mint julep and actually study the events of the week, or am I going to carry this thing by myself?
There are a couple of things. I'm really intrigued and continue to follow, this Coinbase IPO, which is coming up on us. And like many companies, just before they go public, they release their finances and their numbers, and they're huge. I can't get
mind-boggling. When you get that, when the hairs go up on the back of your neck, you're looking at the next big unicorn. And here it is, man. Let me read them. 56 million accounts. That's 13 million new so far this year. So they've gone up, 25% in 3 months. I mean, they're doubling fast. 1.8 billion in revenue in the first 3 months of this year. That's more than all of 2020. So they're quadrupling in terms of revenues. And last year they had a profit of 322 million. Did you get the numbers on profit? I didn't see any profit numbers, but it's got to be close to $1 billion there. And then trading
322 million on 1.3 billion revenue. And that was all of last year. Yeah. And then, they did 1.8 billion just in the last 3 months. I mean, we know that a lot of this stuff is picking up with crypto recently, but this shows you just how much interest has piled into these markets by the most well-known, trading platform, which tells you why big banks, not to mention PayPal and Square, are coming in and saying, hey, you can use our money change to use.
Their economists have got to be looking at these numbers and handing them into the C-level office, saying, you better take a look at this. I mean, this is one of those, we've seen this so many times before. I mean, this is basically our business, right? You and I, you look for the cliffs, and this one is one of those. It's not a cliff, but it's a Moore's curve that it just went vertical. Things been moving along, and all of a sudden, boom, it's going to become an integral part of our daily lives this year. You always predict, it's 5-6 years out, but I think it's here. Trading volume, this is breathtaking. $335 billion in the quarter, basically as much as they did last year. That means they're heading for $1 trillion year in trading. And then finally, total assets on the platform, 223 billion, and 96% of the revenue came from transaction fees. So this is business. I mean, this is hardcore, making money, running the dollar printer. It's impressive. And
it really is. Right. It shows just how popular this has gotten. We don't know. What they haven't done is broken down, we know the trading volume. Is it all big whale traders? Is this the Elon Musk buying $1.5 billion? Or my suspicion is that it's not. I think a lot of people are involved in Bitcoin on a much, much smaller level. And they're using Coinbase apparently. And so it's the large guys, obviously, but I think it's also the people who are sort of dipping a toe in. And this is where they're doing it. And that gives the entire platform, not to mention the entire crypto world, a little more legitimacy to say, hey, these guys, like you say, are printing money, they're doing big business, and they're doing in the last 3 months more on all of these metrics than they did in the entire last year.
Yeah, the moment you see 10x, it's real. It's now heading out into larger society. I bet a lot of that $335 billion was starting to be just regular folks. We haven't seen the old timers put their pension money in, but I think we're starting to see young people dive in with both feet, young professionals, that sort of thing. No, it's on, and I think governments are going to have to learn to deal with this pretty quickly, because I think we're going to see, not only are we seeing a giant boom, but we have the risk of giant bubbles and giant crimes. And if the governments of the developed world don't have SWAT teams looking at this stuff, to try to keep it clean, we got a mess coming up. But
well, one thing
it's breathtaking. Yeah. How big do you think the IPO is going to be?
I think it's going to be very big. I think if you look at all the interest in this, people are going to want to own a piece of it, whether or not they're in Bitcoin. This could be their way into the Bitcoin world. You often say, how do I get into EVs if I don't buy Tesla stock? Well, you can buy, a battery company, you can buy, all that stuff. This could be the people who are a little shy of the crypto world, their way into that market. And so I think it does big business at first. And something you just mentioned, the regulation of it all, that's one of the good things about this company going public. It now has a lot of eyes on it, which, given how much money in this cryptocurrency we're seeing moving, I think it's good to have a lot of eyes on it, because you're right, the potential for, we've seen millions of dollars in crypto just disappear before, right? We can't have that happen a lot once this company is public. It's just not going to be acceptable. More eyes on it, the better. And that.
Yeah. It's hard to analyze because, this is a different kind of company. This is about 23% profit margin on revenues last year. Is that good or bad? I don't know.
I mean, it's still kind of a startup. It feels that way. I imagine they're going to take whatever, a big chunk of whatever they make and start to hire a lot of people. They're going to have to hire a lot of lawyers, all these compliance people. It's going to be a big financial, and, let's take a lesson. I think Robinhood is also going to be watching this very closely. Robinhood is starting to see crypto becoming a bigger part of what it does. And we already know that PayPal and Square, they're public, they're regulated, they know how to handle this stuff. Coinbase and then Robinhood, and it'll be interesting to see how those two interact on the public markets with cash, with real American dollars, given all the Bitcoin that they're starting to move.
There's some interesting questions. I mean, these companies don't have a large physical footprint, so they're not doing heavy capital expenditures. I mean, shouldn't their margins be higher than this? I mean, it seems like they don't have a lot of overhead. They have a bunch of servers.
Right.
What else? The other thing and I think we're coming up to a critical point where governments, remember what defines, a nation: border sovereignty, the ability to defend itself, a currency, and a few other things. Well, this currency is challenging all the currencies of the world, even as China has admitted that they want to become the currency of the world now. I see a collision out there somewhere, and I see governments getting involved out of their own interests, not interests of the populace, but to defend themselves against this challenge to their command and control of the economy. So I think that day is coming too. I'm waiting for the hearings that are going to erupt on Capitol Hill and Parliament and everywhere else in the next few years. So anyway, exciting story. You and I don't do IPOs, but I'm sure, I remember way back when Apple went public, I was in the Mercury News newsroom, and fellow reporters would come up and go, "Hey, Mike, how can I get some of that Apple IPO stock?" I said, first of all, it's against the law for you. But second, I have no idea. I can't have any idea. I bet there's a lot of conversations going on right now. How do I get in on Coinbase? Everybody wants in on that opening day. So we'll see. Keep your ear to the ground. If you get hit up for a Coinbase connection, let us know.
Yeah.
Okay, from Bob Grove, billionaire venture capitalist Peter Thiel is worried that China is using Bitcoin to undermine the United States. Quote, even though I'm a pro-crypto, pro-Bitcoin maximalist person, I do wonder whether at this point Bitcoin should also be thought of in part as a Chinese financial weapon against the US. Now, Peter throws a lot of stuff out to see what'll stick, but what do you think? He also attacked Google and Apple and Amazon for not being sufficiently, American and being pro-China and going to help China conquer the world. So,
right.
Let's put it all.
I just wonder how much, honestly, Peter Thiel, for all of his influence, tremendous influence that he used to hold over the Valley, is being listened to right now by people in Silicon Valley. I mean, he's moved away. He's making these increasingly sort of strange governmental conspiracy statements.
Well, he's always been kind of a crank. I mean, that's all part of being Peter Thiel. But sometimes he's brilliant, Sometimes he nails it. What do you think? This one?
Well, look, what do I know? Do I know of evidence that China is using Bitcoin as a weapon? No, of course I don't. It's being traded like gangbusters in the United States, making money for people and companies in the United States. There are entire ETFs dedicated to it. Here in America, companies like PayPal and Square, not the big banks in America, are jumping in. If it's a Chinese wielded weapon, they're doing a really good job at infiltrating American commerce, because American commerce is embracing Bitcoin with a big hug right now.
Okay. This is the age of shortages, unexpectedly. The economy's starting to warm up. And I ran into it on some website. I was reading the comments and people were saying, oh, I tried to buy Lipton soup yesterday and they didn't have any. Or I tried to buy an arc welder. They didn't have any. I tried to buy 30 pounds of fertilizer. The shelves were empty. And I thought, well, this is kind of odd. Is American production not cranking up? And then all of a sudden, I was reminded of semiconductors. And the semiconductor shortage is getting worse. Just reading that, mainly because of the rapid demand and the surge in demand for new cars. People have been sitting on these clunkers for the last year. I've noticed in my neighborhood, everybody's rehabbing their house. Well, everybody's going to start buying new cars if they can get them. But right now, IHS Markit estimates that 1 million vehicles are being delayed by the shortage of semiconductors. And that's going to add up to billions of dollars. In fact, Ford has curtailed production of its F-150. I mean, when Ford has to stop production of F-150s, I have one parked right out beyond that window over there. It's the American vehicle. It is the best-selling four-wheeled vehicle in the United States. And Ford has had to stop production, which is just astonishing. General Motors has prioritized its manufacturing to just full-size pickups and SUVs. That means if you want a medium-sized car or a mini truck, you're going to have a hell of a time getting it. And these closures can go up to 3 months. Toyota has done a little bit better, at least in the semiconductors, though they're having a little bit of trouble too. And Honda had to shut down most of its North American production in March because of multiple supply chain snarls. So is the problem production or is it supply chain? These fabs can gear up to produce billions of chips. Are they just not getting out there, or they prioritized wrong, or what else? Meanwhile, it's not just chips, because apparently there's battery shortages now too for the electric vehicles. What the hell's going on here?
Well, I mean, with the chips, we've known this for months, and that's because so many of them were being used for all the software and hardware that we're using at home. For lithium-ion batteries, that's a new one. And I think that's because of the sudden surge in EVs and looking out. Here in America, we call it a big surge. Woo, you'd think everybody's buying it. It's still something like 2 or 3% of the market. So if it really does catch on, think of all the batteries, not to mention all the chargers we'll need. So there are companies, like ChargePoint, that are ramping up. These battery companies, certainly Tesla and Panasonic, working in, Nevada on their site. But yeah, we're starting to see in other countries, companies like NIO and Lucid coming in, Volvo's putting out these cars. And so we need more lithium ion batteries, not to mention they're also in our laptops and a lot of the hardware we buy. So we may still be seeing some of the effects of what's hot during the pandemic start to bleed over into the rest of the economy. What's hot in tech is now affecting EVs, much like in the chip world. And that strikes me as somewhat natural. We're not, we didn't see this pandemic coming and saying, let's build more fabs, right? That sort of caught us by surprise. And that's why you see the stock prices of the Lam Researches and the Applied Materials skyrocketing, because now we're saying we need you guys more than ever. Get busy, because this new way that we're doing business, and it's going to last at least a little while longer, demands a ton of chips. And now this new way we're driving demands a lot of lithium ion batteries, because we're buying EVs more than we were before.
Okay, well, let's look at the dark side for a moment, because you covered this in the past. When you get a major chip shortage, the biggest one was in the 90s, where you can't get enough devices and entire manufacturing lines are sitting idle because you can't get a single, $100 chip. You know what happens? The gray market emerges. And these are good guys, these are bad guys, these are wheeler dealers, but essentially they create their own supply chain, which is they buy scrap chips. They're working at 80% and they sell those, because the purchasing guy at the, in Flint, Michigan, at the Ford plant, at River Rouge, he's given an assignment. Those F-150s out there in the on the assembly floor are not moving. So Fred, you get out there and you get us those chips we need. However, whatever you need to do, get them. If you have to pay $300 for a $100 chip, pay it. Because right now we're making nothing. And Fred goes, well, I can't even get him at 300. But there's a guy, and we've had cases where the Black Gorilla family was using hookers to distract workmen on the loading dock at like National Semiconductor, so the other guys could slip in and steal barrels of scrap chips and then move them out, test them, and if they were good enough, sell them, through the underground. I mean, that's what's happened in the past. It could happen again, and I sense it's going to happen right now, because you can't gear up fab that fast. I mean, we're kind of at the limit of production right now. Intel's going to build 2 more, but that's going to take 3 years. There's going to be a lot of demand out there. There are stories of people showing up at hotel rooms next to the San Francisco airport with briefcases full of cash, checking into a room. Another guy checks into a room next door. They open the intermediary door, but they only open it a little bit. Pass the chips one way, pass the attaché case the other way. They never look at each other. I mean, this is what it gets to when the economy gets desperate during a chip shortage. So you may be busy. You may be running around. I covered murders during that period over chips. So let's see what happens. It could get real ugly. Okay, stock market. Great guns. S&P 500 reached an all-time high, over almost 4,100. Blue chip index is on track for a 3rd straight week. NASDAQ and Dow added to their futures, added to their regular session gains. And you have the Federal Reserve essentially saying, yeah, we haven't met our forecast yet. And the message being, this economy still has a lot to grow before it begins to slow down again. And I think the market just went nuts on that news. You believe it?
Yeah, well, this is all, I think, related to optimism coming out of the pandemic, not just that people will be healthy again, but that they will be spending money again. And, there's nothing to say that won't happen. The good news is we're starting to see some of the businesses come back as these counties and cities and states reopen. People are now, able to go into restaurants, and soon they'll go into ball games and everything. So that there's a feeling of optimism. But, the numbers have to add up. People have to feel good enough to do it. they are traveling again, in a few weeks,
Yes.
we're going to see cases spike. That would really hurt the economy to say, uh-oh, it turns out we're not ready to have the roaring 20s yet. But assuming cases stay low, I think economic optimism stays high, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, you know, I got to admit that second vaccine, all of a sudden I felt liberated. You know, it's only going to be a couple of weeks here. There's going to be the Pacific Ocean on the Oregon coast behind me on this image. But we haven't audited the consequences of the pandemic yet.
Right.
We don't know how many businesses are going to go bankrupt. We don't know how many people are going to get laid off. You know, it must be lovely to be in the buildings and trades right now. I mean, there's construction going on up and down my street. Everybody's adding a new wing or a new roof or, you know, a new kitchen. You know, we seem to be hugely optimistic, but my question is it built on sand right now? Because we just don't know how much damage has been done. And a spike would just kill us. You know, if we suddenly had to lock down again, I mean, that would break people's spirits, I think. Right now, I think we're heady with optimism, but, you know, maybe too soon.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, the Biden tax plan targets one Trump tax feature for elimination. Foreign derived intangible income deduction, the FDII. Okay, this apparently is going to cost U.S. companies. One estimate is will add it added 1.45 billion to Google's earnings in 2020, which means that will be lost. Facebook 630 million, Microsoft 584, and Amazon's the winner because they don't have a lot of operations overseas, so 372 million. So, you know, they're going to get taxed for all their offshore operations, which is going to, the idea is to force them to come back to the US. But in the short term, it's going to damage their financials. I mean, I'm not sure the market is convinced that tax is going to pass. But the moment it passes, we're going to see a bit of a drop in the blue chip tech companies.
I don't know. I mean, remember, Biden is not the first, nor the second, nor the third president to try to get companies to, you know, pay the taxes that they, let's be honest, should be paying. This is something that the tech companies have done for many years. I'll believe it when I see it because it just hasn't happened yet. We've had Democrats try, we've had Republicans try, and the companies will not do it. The lobbyists are fighting it as we speak. It would be a significant revenue boost for America to get the American companies to pay their taxes to America, but they don't. And so out a significant chunk of revenue.
Well, it's interesting, Jeff Bezos has kind of come out for it. And I suspect that's because he's going to take less of a hit than all of his competitors out there, his big boy competitors. So Wharton, though, projects that it could raise $260 billion over 10 years. Now, I'm always wary of revenue projections because the moment you raise taxes, people figure out a way not to pay your taxes. But even if it's just a fraction of that $260 billion, that's pretty impressive. That's a major injection to the economy. So I think you're absolutely right on that. Let's see what happens. Okay, the FTC calls Facebook a social networking monopoly in its latest filing. Facebook has had another bad week. First, it may have this tax. Second, it's being called a monopoly by the feds. You know, the FTC, those are people you don't want to piss off. And then finally, they went down for an hour this week? Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp, you know, the whole Facebook family, boom. Do they know what happened? Oh, and they had 500 million users' names stolen by a hacker.
Yeah, I was going to say that was the kickoff to a bad week. They've had a rough week, and yet their stock price is at an all-time high. Nothing is denting investors' love for Facebook. I mean, the entire system could be down, and people are like, "Let's pile money into that stock." It's got security issues. Let's pile money into the stock. It's a monopoly, according to the FTC. Doesn't matter. They're running on bulletproof time right now, and Even Apple and Facebook are now fighting. So they're the two tech blue chips fighting each other over privacy issues. But nothing is slowing the progress of that stock. It's above $300 this morning as we speak.
One of my rules is, as a reporter, if everything seems insane, it actually is insane. It just, people are all deluding themselves. I should also mention, just to be fair, LinkedIn got nailed for by hackers for just about as many people. And those hackers are offering it, the stolen list, for sale out there on the gray market. That makes me feel comfortable.
Right. Websites have already popped up. Put your number in to see if Facebook has, released your data. Be careful of anything out there, including Facebook, folks. But then again, look, I've been saying that for years. And
you've been warning people as long as I have known you. And nobody's listening.
Nobody's listening.
All right. Okay. You and I have that dollar bet that I'm betting that Google will never get to downtown San Jose. I'm now thinking you may win that bet because Google and the San Jose city government have agreed to a development agreement for the downtown West project. Google's going to inject $150 million into a community fund, according to a labor group I got an email from, grounded in racial justice and governed by grassroots leaders. Okay, well, that suggests that maybe Google's going to do it, going to pull the string. $150 million is sort of coffee money for Google right now. And if that buys off all the people protesting, then it's probably worth it. And they could probably even afford to lose $150 million. But I think I'm going to owe you that buck. We should have set a date on it because it's not going to happen tomorrow.
No.
There's more stuff real estate is being bought in Mountain View around Google, like $600 million worth. So something's going on there. And, those developers always have their ear to the ground, and they sense, what moves are about to take place. And I'll bet that, Google's going to expand in Mountain View before it moves to San Jose.
That makes sense. I mean, because one is an expansion and one is an absolute groundbreaking. But I mean, Google's another company that has not slowed the pace of growth and hiring. And even as they just spent a very successful year not using their businesses, it's clear that their future plans include buying more real estate and putting more individuals out of their homes and into Google offices. So we'll see.
Well, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the rest of your vacation, Scott. The Valley needs you back, and we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.